Welcome to Being at Home with George during this time of COVID. Very excited to be here. And we start this process by embracing whatever comes up and at the same time generating hope. And of course, it's more challenging when we are embracing challenges, difficulties, things like what I would call a swirl or feeling overwhelmed because there's so many things going on at once and we're not able to ascertain what do we do next. It's just so many buckets going on and we have to figure out how do we manage that. And so I think that's part of life, is part of this process of evolution, this process of, being closed down, then opening up, and then potentially not knowing if we're going to shut down, or even having friends that have children who go to school, and if somebody in their class has been exposed, they have to quarantine or they have to stay home for 10 days or whatever. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and we need to understand how to deal with that. But that's the sense I'm getting from family and friends. And the last couple of times I've had opportunities to teach or to share my experience, strength, and hope with folks, it's been coming up about, how do you manage when there's so much stuff going on that makes your head spin. And I was talking to this young lady at a college that I was talking to, and she was feeling, and I can understand that. And I was talking to a colleague of mine that actually coaches women's volleyball, that now they're getting hit with all of the academic requirements they have to have. And at the same time, they're in the middle of the season and they're playing. And this young lady was feeling very overwhelmed. And I asked her, I said, how do you start a 1,000-mile journey? And she said, one step. And I said, that's it. That's what you have to do. You start a 1,000-mile journey a step at a time. And it's the same for us. And I also talked to her about this idea of the W.I.N, W-I-N, what's important now. And that's how I deal with it. I have a lot of things because I fit that category. There's this saying that if you want something done, give it to a busy person. That would be me. That might be you as well. And then understanding what's important now. So what is it? What's important and now, today, keeping it in the day. And I like to say, not only keep it in the day, but make the next play. So it doesn't matter if you're playing a sport or not, but you have these requirements and you make the next play. It's what is called do what you know to do, and then the next step will be given to you. And so what I interpret that to mean is just do the one thing and then keep moving from one thing to the next thing. Now, there was this movie, Hackshaw Ridge. It's a real story about this medic during World War II, and he was able to rescue, I believe it was 75 wounded servicemen. And the way he did it was he kept saying, Lord, let me get one more. He kept doing it one wounded person or one man at a time. He just kept doing that. And he got to 75. And that's how we do it. Slow motion gets you there quicker, but do what you know to do, and the next step will be given. So you do that. There's a sense of accomplishment, and then we go to the next thing. And so sometimes things get so overwhelming and we feel like, oh, there's a lot of suffering here. And what I know from my experience is what Viktor Frankl said when he talked about this idea of when we find meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering. And so it's this idea of, okay, what's the lesson here? And sometimes it may be nothing more than to bring some compassion, some empathy, some understanding to a person suffering. So when it's our suffering, for me, it's helpful sometimes to understand when I'm suffering, what's the lesson I need to learn? And even though things may not be the way I like, maybe they could be a lot worse. And so I have to find that silver lining. But it's very tricky because there's this way of being with things sometimes when we're being with it in order to get rid of it. And we're not really embracing it, really saying, yeah, this is happening and I don't like it. But to fully let it in and to feel it, and then to say, okay, so something happened. How do I interpret that? How do I relate to it in a way that puts me at ease? And so it's really important that we understand how to establish a basis from which to observe our experience, because we have this ability to step back and to observe our experience as a silent witness, as a way of observing it without trying to interpret or to push it away to pull it towards us. So this foundation or this space from which we observe experience, if we can observe it, I talk about the hurricane, or just settling and say, okay, so what is happening, and asking ourselves what's important now, and just really doing that one thing. And then once we do that, then we can move to the next thing. And one of the things it does, it reminds me of this definition that Earl Nightingale talks about. Success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So the idea is baby steps to make progress. And when we have a big project, when I have a big project, when I can just do one thing at a time, what's important now, make the next play, and just do what I know to do, and then the rest will figure it out. But we make progress when we have faith that we're going to get it done, that we're not doing this alone. We have a masterpiece we can access. We can actually let the masterpiece speak to us. And it says things like that still small voice that says, what's important? How can I serve? How can I relate to this situation in a way that empowers me, but also it allows me to express myself, to be able to be of service to myself and others. So it's really, really important. And in terms of speaking and talking to people, I've been doing a lot of meditating on things like faith and virtue and understanding. And I came across this quote that's really important, and it talks about minimizing the faults and magnifying the virtues. And so I like to talk about this idea of catching somebody doing something right, or when we are really challenged with challenges and difficulties, that what's the stance? Can we take a stand and observe it in a way where we can keep our composure and at the same time observe what's happening so that we can see the blessings, see the opportunities that are available to us. And so this idea of not resisting evil, so it's called renunciation. So I'd like to share it with you, and it's a good way of how to deal with this stuff. So there's a great difference between resisting evil and renouncing it. When you resist evil, you give attention. You continue to make it real. When you renounce evil, you take your attention from it and give your attention to what you want. Now is the time to control your imagination and give beauty for ashes, joy for mourning, praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. You give beauty for ashes when you concentrate on things as you would like them to be rather than on things as they are. You give joy for mourning when you maintain a joyous attitude regardless of unfavorable circumstances. You give praise for the spirit of heaviness when you maintain a confident attitude instead of succumbing to despondency. So this comes back to what we talked about previously. We become what we think about. So if we focus on what we want and focus on how we want to serve, focus on how we want to make things better, then that is what's going to manifest if we keep focusing on what's right. And so we could see the divinity in ourselves, and we can see that just like me, that person wants to be happy, but they may be behaving in an unskillful way, in an unwise way. If we can just see the good in them, if we can magnify the virtues and minimize the faults, and just really hold that space that, yeah, just like me, this person wants to be happy. Just like me, this person suffers. And so we have to get to a point where we start to understand that we need to get beyond this illusion of separateness and realize we are all one. We all experience all of these emotions, and that we all have challenges, and we all have this masterpiece, this still small voice that's easily drowned out. If we can be still and know, and we can just connect and say, how can I be helpful? How can I serve? How can I help bring some peace to where there is no peace, joy where there is no joy, love where there is no love, and understanding where there's no understanding. And so that's how we can get to this place where feeling overwhelmed, to getting to a place where, yes, we can feel like one step at a time, we can go 1,000 miles if we can just take the one step.